On the 17th cassette of this Bible study lecture series, Dr. Howard C. Estep, president of World Prophetic Ministry Incorporated, will bring two more messages from the book of Genesis. Let's listen in with the Friday night Bible study audience in the King is Coming Auditorium at Colton, California, and we hear Dr. Estep beginning to teach from Genesis chapter 36.
If you turn in your Bibles to the book of Genesis, chapters 36 and 37 in this lesson. Chapter 36, we're going to have the Word of God read by Alexander Scorby. I've broken it down just briefly before we have the reading of chapter 36. A, sons of Esau and Canaan, verses 1 through 8. B, sons of Esau and Mount Seir, verses 9 through 14. C, dukes in Edom, verses 15 through 19. D, sons in Seir, verses 20 through 28. E, dukes in Seir, 29 through 30. F, kings of Edom, verses 31 through 39. And G, dukes of Edom, verses 40 through 43. Now, all of this is the sons of Esau, and so we're calling upon the marvelous, magnificent voice of Alexander Scorby to read this scripture for us.
Chapter 36. Now these are the generations of Esau, who is Edom. Esau took his wives of the daughters of Canaan, Adah, the daughter of Elon the Hittite, and Aholibamah, the daughter of Anah, the daughter of Zibeon the Hivite, and Bashemath, Ishmael's daughter, sister of Nebajoth. And Adah bare to Esau Eliphaz, and Bashemath bare Reuel, and Aholibamah bare Jeush, and Jaalam, and Korah. These are the sons of Esau, which were born unto him in the land of Canaan. And Esau took his wives and his sons and his daughters and all the persons of his house and his cattle and all his beasts and all his substance which he had got in the land of Canaan, and went into the country from the face of his brother Jacob. For their riches were more than that they might dwell together, and the land wherein they were strangers could not bear them because of their cattle. Thus dwelt Esau in Mount Seir. Esau is Edom. And these are the generations of Esau, the father of the Edomites, in Mount Seir. These are the names of Esau's sons: Eliphaz, the son of Adah, the wife of Esau; Reuel, the son of Bashemath, the wife of Esau. And the sons of Eliphaz were Teman, Omar, Zepho, and Gatam, and Kenaz. And Timnah was concubine to Eliphaz, Esau's son, and she bare to Eliphaz Amalek. These were the sons of Adah, Esau's wife. And these are the sons of Reuel: Nahath, and Zerah, Shammah, and Mizah. These were the sons of Bashemath, Esau's wife. And these were the sons of Aholibamah, the daughter of Anah, the daughter of Zibeon, Esau's wife. And she bare to Esau Jeush, and Jaalam, and Korah. These were dukes of the sons of Esau. The sons of Eliphaz, the firstborn son of Esau: Duke Teman, Duke Omar, Duke Zepho, Duke Kenaz, Duke Korah, Duke Gatam, and Duke Amalek. These are the dukes that came of Eliphaz in the land of Edom. These were the sons of Adah. And these are the sons of Reuel, Esau's son: Duke Nahath, Duke Zerah, Duke Shammah, Duke Mizah. These are the dukes that came of Reuel in the land of Edom. These are the sons of Bashemath, Esau's wife. And these are the sons of Aholibamah, Esau's wife: Duke Jeush, Duke Jaalam, Duke Korah. These were the dukes that came of Aholibamah, the daughter of Anah, Esau's wife. These are the sons of Esau, who is Edom, and these are their dukes. These are the sons of Seir the Horite, who inhabited the land: Lotan, and Shobal, and Zibeon, and Anah, and Dishon, and Ezer, and Dishan. These are the dukes of the Horites, the children of Seir in the land of Edom. And the children of Lotan were Hori and Hemam, and Lotan's sister was Timnah. And the children of Shobal were these: Alvan, and Manahath, and Ebal, Shepho, and Onam. And these are the children of Zibeon, both Ajah and Anah. This was that Anah that found the mules in the wilderness as he fed the asses of Zibeon his father. And the children of Anah were these, Dishon and Aholibamah, the daughter of Anah. And these are the children of Dishon, Hemdan and Eshban and Ithran and Kiran. The children of Ezer are these, Bilhan and Zaavan and Achan. The children of Dishan are these, Uz and Aaron. These are the dukes that came of the Horites, Duke Lotan, Duke Shobal, Duke Zibeon, Duke Anah, Duke Dishon, Duke Ezer, Duke Dishan. These are the dukes that came of Hori among their dukes in the land of Seir. And these are the kings that reigned in the land of Edom before there reigned any king over the children of Israel. And Bela, the son of Beor, reigned in Edom, and the name of his city was Dinhabah. And Bela died, and Jobab, the son of Zerah of Bozrah, reigned in his stead. And Jobab died, and Husham of the land of Temani reigned in his stead. And Husham died, and Hadad the son of Bedad, who smote Midian in the field of Moab, reigned in his stead. And the name of his city was Avith. And Hadad died, and Samlah of Masrekah reigned in his stead. And Samlah died, and Saul of Rehoboth by the river reigned in his stead. And Saul died, and Baal-Hanan the son of Achbor reigned in his stead. And Baal-Hanan the son of Achbor died, and Hadar reigned in his stead. And the name of his city was Payu, and his wife's name was Mehetabel, the daughter of Matred, the daughter of Mazahab. And these are the names of the dukes that came of Esau, according to their families, after their places, by their names. Duke Timnah, Duke Alva, Duke Jetheth, Duke Aholibamah, Duke Elah, Duke Pinon, Duke Kenaz, Duke Teman, Duke Mibzar, Duke Magdiel, Duke Iram. These be the dukes of Edom, according to their habitations in the land of their possession. He is Esau, the father of the Edomites.
Now, this is a parenthetical reading of the scripture because at the close of chapter 35, you have, and his sons Esau and Jacob buried him. You have here the death of Isaac. And so this reading which we have just had is a parenthetical reading because when we come now to chapter 37, we pick right up where we would have normally. But for some reason or other, those who collected these chapters into the Bible, they put this in here to give us the names of the children of Esau. So we go now to chapter 37, and I've broken it down into 5 parts for you. 1, Joseph in Canaan, that's verses 1 through 4. 2, 2 dreams of Joseph, verses 5 through 11. 3, Joseph seeks his brothers, verses 12 through 17. 4, plot against Joseph, verses 18 through 28. And lastly, number 5, Jacob deceived by his sons. That's verses 29 through 36. And this is chapter 37. And here we have Jacob's history resumed, and actually we go into the history of Joseph. So we move to the first part of chapter 37, verses 1 through 4, Joseph in Canaan. And verse 1 says, And Jacob dwelt in the land wherein his father was a stranger, in the land of Canaan. After completing the history of Isaac and Esau in Genesis 35, beginning in verse 27 through chapter 36 through 43, Moses now continues the history of Jacob and his family, which was dropped back in chapter 35. So we have Jacob dwelt in the land wherein his father was a stranger, in the land of Canaan. We move to verse 2. These are the generations of Jacob. Here we have the history of what befell him and his posterity, not a regular genealogy, but a history of what befell Jacob. These are the generations of Jacob, Joseph being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and with the sons of Zilpah. These are the two concubines of Jacob. He was with the sons of these two women, his father's wives, and Joseph brought unto his father their evil report. This phrase, evil report, is a report of the evil doings of his other brothers. The other brothers were evil toward the young lad Joseph. They had feelings against him, as we'll see as we continue in this study. We're looking now at Joseph in Canaan. Verse 3, Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age. It's rather interesting. Jacob was about 91 years old when Joseph was born. This was not a son of his old age more than some of the others. Benjamin was born about 9 years after Joseph. Hence, the phrase must refer to a son especially devoted to the care of Jacob in his old age. What some commentators have believed is that young Joseph had a special love for his elderly father, and he was a go-between the father and the other sons, and there was an affinity between the father and the sons brought about by young Joseph. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. This phrase, a coat of many colors, was a mark of honor and rank, and was worn only by the chief heir of the father's inheritance. Whoever was going to be the chief heir of the father's inheritance was usually given a special garment that he wore that identified him in the tribe as being that particular person. The garment was of many colors, not pieces, marking it as a priestly and royal robe, and possibly with fine and beautiful needlework of various colored threads. Some think this refers to a coat made of many broad stripes of different colored cloth, but evidently that isn't true. It was a special coat, especially woven for a special person, and this young Joseph was the one who had inherited it, or to whom it was conferred upon. Verse 4 says, And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more, his brothers, his other brothers. See, there was the reason for hatred and the reason for greed, the reason for feeling among the other brothers. And when his brothers or brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him. Why did they hate him? And could not speak peaceably unto him or of him. So they hated him because of his position, and as we see in a few moments, because of his character, because of his dreams. He was one of the few men in the Old Testament that received dreams and also received the talent or the ability to interpret those dreams, as we'll see in just a few moments. Now he's going to have dreams in verses 5 through 11. Verse 5 says, And Joseph dreamed a dream. That's about all he could dream, I would think. And Joseph dreamed a dream. That's usually what I dream when I dream, is a dream. And Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it his brethren. That's where he made his mistake. If he had just kept quiet, I don't think he'd have had as many problems as he did have. But maybe this story would not have turned out the way it did if he had kept quiet. Anyhow, he dreamed a dream, and he told his dream to his brothers, and they hated him yet the more. They hated him to start with. They hated him, first of all, because he was chosen heir of the father's inheritance. He had the beautiful coat of priestly robe that he was given by the aged father. So the other boys, the other brothers hated him. Verse 6 says, And he said unto them, talking to his other brothers, hear, I pray you, this dream which I have dreamed. Have you ever had someone want you to sit down and listen to the dream that they dreamed the night before? It's really exciting, isn't it? Really exciting. So you can imagine these brothers of Joseph, they really wanted to sit down and listen to this young squirt tell him about a dream he had. To begin with, they didn't care for him. So, what's going to happen? Verse 7. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field. Joseph the prophet, he becomes a prophet here. Joseph the prophet predicted his family would become dependent upon all and humbled before him in Egypt. Young lad, not yet down in Egypt. He's having visions and dreams. Verse 7, for behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose and also stood upright, and behold, your sheaves stood round about and made obeisance to my sheaf. They were binding grain in what we call shocks. Back home in the southern part of the USA where I used to live, there was shocks. But the other shocks of grain, they were doing obedience to his shock. In other words, his shock was in charge of all of the others. So he had this in a dream. And you can see how this is going to set with his other brothers. Verse 8 says, and his brothers or brethren said to him, shalt thou indeed reign over us? You're just a young brother. You're just a young squirt in this family. Are you going to reign over us? Or shalt thou indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him yet the more for his dreams and for his words. So this is putting this young lad, Joseph, in a very bad situation. But this brings out the doctrine that I have been proclaiming for many long years. God is over and above every circumstance, every situation. If the individual who is involved in that or those circumstances will adhere to God's will for their lives, God will see them clear. God will bring them through the circumstance. Here's a young lad, the chosen son of an elderly father, and all of the other brothers are despiteful to him. They don't like him. They hate him. And they think of him as a dreamer. And so he is creating quite a bad situation in that family. We notice in verse 9 it says, and he dreamed yet another dream. He had it bad enough to start with. Now he's had another dream. Verse 9, and told it his brethren and said, behold, I have dreamed a dream more. I've dreamed another dream. You can imagine these boys early in the morning. They're up. They've had their breakfast. They have their assignments to go out to such and such a valley, watch the sheep, watch the goats, etc. And here comes this young brother, dressed in that flashy coat of his, and he says, hey, wait a minute, I've had another dream. I want to tell you about it. You can see how they get up on edges with that going on. So he dreamed another dream, it says in the middle of verse 9, and dreamed a dream more, and behold, the sun and the moon. The sun and the moon, and the 11 stars made obeisance to me. What's the understanding here? The sun and the moon, a symbol of Israel. The sun representing Jacob, and the moon his wives, and the 12 stars his 12 sons. Because Jacob became the father of 12 sons, who became the fathers of the 12 tribes. Prophecy preacher way back there in the early part of Genesis. The sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeisance to me, and he told it to his father. He wasn't content to just tell it to his brother. He went in and told it to his father, his aged father, and to his brethren, and his father rebuked him. It's rather strange. Partly through ignorance and partly in wisdom. because the old man realized that this boy kept being what we would term, quote, smart aleck, end quote. He's going to cause a family feud. And so the old man, trying to calm him down, rebuked him. According to verse 10, and his father rebuked him and said unto him, What is this dream that thou hast dreamed? What is this dream? In other words, Jacob rightly interpreted the dream as referring to himself and his family being dependent upon Joseph and being humbled before him. What is this dream? Shall I and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come to bow down ourselves to thee, to the earth? Now they're living in Canaan. They have not gone down to Egypt yet. And here's this young lad who has the touch of God upon his mind. And God is beginning to touch his mind and to reveal to him prophetic situations in the form of dreams, preparing this family for the eventual, for the inevitable. And it's marvelous that we can't see the end before the beginning. Because if sometimes we could see the end before the beginning, we might deter or we might sidetrack ourselves, and we might not accomplish what we would normally if we just keep plowing ahead, not knowing the actual ending, but only knowing the immediate now circumstances. So this young lad really didn't think that he would become prime minister of Egypt. He didn't really know that, because he was in his infancy, as it were, in getting these dreams and interpreting them, but not interpreting them to the point that he could pinpoint some major situations that would develop later on. So the father says, Shall I and thy mother and thy brethren come to bow down ourselves to thee to the earth? Is that what you're trying to say to us? Verse 11, and his brethren envied him. They envied him, but his father observed the saying. The father was elderly. He had wisdom. He had experience. He'd been down the highway of life a little farther than the sons had. Therefore, the father paid some attention to what the young lad was saying. In verse 11, and his brethren envied him. This envy was added to hatred. Envy is selfish and unfriendly grudging of what another enjoys. They didn't have that ability. They did not have that gift of dreams and interpretation of dreams. We have a man over in the Old Testament by the name of Daniel who had the same ability. Daniel had the ability to have dreams and he could interpret them. Here we have young Joseph. Now we move to the third part of chapter 37, and Joseph is sent out to hunt for his brothers. And the plot is going to thicken somewhat, because you'll see that the brothers are going to use this situation coming up to, they think, to destroy him. But you see, if God be for you, nobody can be against you. Nobody. Absolutely not. Joseph seeks his brothers in verses 12 through 17. Verse 12 says, and his brethren went to feed their sheep, or their father's flock, in Shechem. Verse 13, and Israel, this is Jacob. Remember, Jacob's name was changed to Israel. When he says in Israel, it's Jacob. And Israel said unto Joseph, do not thy brethren feed the flock in Shechem? Come, and I will send thee unto them. And he said unto him, here am I. The father says, son, I want you to go to Shechem, check up on your brothers. Evidently, these men, these brothers, they went out for weeks at a time. They didn't just go out from 8 o'clock in the morning and get back at 4:30 in the evening. That wasn't the way they did it. Verse 14 says, and he said to him, the father saying to the young son Joseph, go, I pray thee, see whether it be well with thy brethren. They've been gone for a long time, several weeks. Go see if any of them are sick. See if an animal has attacked the flock or some of them. Go see if thy brethren are well, and well with the flocks, and bring me word again. So he sent him out of the vale of Hebron. Vale is valley. He sent him out of the valley of Hebron on his way to Shechem. Hebron is about approximately 18 to 20 miles south of Jerusalem, down in that area. So they're down there south of Jerusalem in the area of Hebron. Now they're going to Shechem, verse 15. And a certain man found him, as young Joseph is wandering along, because he doesn't know exactly where they are. He had no way of knowing. But in verse 15, a certain man found him, and behold, he was wandering in the field, looking for them. And the man asked him, saying, What seekest thou? What are you looking for? What are you doing out here by yourself? You're a young lad. Evidently, he's dressed in this beautiful coat. And this could be startling out on the prairie, out in the area where sheep would graze or goats would graze over in the Middle East. The grain only grows about 12 inches to 8 inches high. Things don't grow over there in abundance like they do in our part of the world, especially back in the Midwest, in the corn belt and the wheat belt, etc. Just a small ground covering over there. And so this man, it doesn't say who he is, he sees this beautiful, bright, brilliant coat, and he says to himself, wonder what that is. That's strange. Out here on the prairie. And he goes up to him and he says, Who are you? What are you looking for? What's on your mind? What's the purpose? What's it all about? What seekest thou? Verse 16, And Joseph said, I seek my brethren. I'm looking for my brothers. Tell me, I pray thee, where they feed their flocks. What he's saying in so many words, have you seen some young fellas with some goats and some sheep? Have you noticed them on the hills anywhere, down in the valleys? Have you noticed anybody with some herds feeding their flocks? That's what he's saying in verse 16. Verse 17, And the man said, They are departed hence. They went that way. They departed hence. For I heard them say, Let us go to Dothan. Isn't that amazing? God had this man over here, the brothers of Joseph, say, We're going up toward Dothan. We've heard that there's some good grazing up there. There's an abundance of water. It's a good place to graze the sheep and the goats. We're going up toward Dothan, because they didn't really have any special place to go. They're just looking around. And Joseph went after his brethren and found them in Dothan. Up in Dothan. Dothan was on the high road to Egypt, the caravan route from the east. Isn't that amazing? All arranged. God had the brothers, instead of wandering around in the valley near Hebron or Shechem, God had the brothers go up toward Dothan. Because God has this all planned. God is going to have this young lad wind up down in Egypt. And this young lad's going to be the provider of the foods for his family later on, as we see as this story begins to unfold in its great magnitude. So they're up toward Dothan. Okay. Now there's a plot against Joseph. In verses 18 through 28, evidently Joseph went up toward Dothan. He found his brothers, evidently, the flocks, so forth. He took the message that his father had given him to convey to them. And in verse 18 it says, And when they saw him afar off, they couldn't help but spot him with that bright colored coat on. When they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him. See, they had this malice and this greed and this selfishness and this murder in their heart all the time. When they left home several weeks ago, maybe 2 or 3 months ago, they had conspired while they're watching the herds. They said, that young squirt, let's get even with him. Let's wipe him out. He's not going to lord it over us. He doesn't have any right to be wearing that coat of priestly robe that he wears. And why our dad likes him more than we're the ones that do the hard work. He doesn't do the hard work. He sits in the tent with Dad all the time. He's a sissy. Let's kill him. Let's get rid of him. That's what he's saying here in verse 18. They conspired against him to slay him. Verse 19. And they said one to another, Behold, this dreamer cometh. He'd already been telling them about the dreams that he had. So they said, This dreamer cometh. Here he comes. This dreamer. Verse 20. Come now, therefore, and let us slay him and cast him into some pit. Now these pits are abandoned water wells, or what we call cisterns or reservoirs. Over there, when you are out with your goats and your sheep, you can dig down 4 or 5 feet and you can strike water. It's a common thing with just a crude shovel to dig a well, and you hit a stream of water. And they have the knack of knowing where the stream of water is underneath the ground, because those wells are all over the place. So these abandoned wells that had the stream of water had dried up, or the earthquakes or the shifting of the inner crust of the earth had caused the water course to go another direction, those wells dried up. So there are these abandoned wells or pits all over the country, all around the landscape. So they say to themselves here in verse 20, Come now, therefore, let us slay him and cast him into some pit. Just throw him into one of these abandoned wells. And we will say, Some evil beast hath devoured him. And we shall see what will become of his dreams. We'll see how good he is. We'll see how good his dreams are. He's always telling us about the dreams that he's going to have, and how his sheaf is standing up higher than our sheaf, and how the family's going to bow down to him. Well, let's throw him in one of these abandoned water wells and see what happens to him. Let's see him get out of there. Verse 21. And Reuben heard it, one of the brothers, heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands. One of the brothers stepped in, and he stopped the other brothers from slaying young Joseph, delivered him out of their hands, and said, Let us not kill him. Let's don't kill him. At least one of the brothers had some sense anyhow. Let's don't kill him. Verse 22. And Reuben said unto them, Shed no blood, but cast him into this pit. Cast him into the pit that is in the wilderness, and lay no hand upon him, that he might rid him out of their hands, to deliver him to his father again. Reuben was thinking about rescuing him later on. But we just put him in a pit right now, and that'll satisfy the brothers. Reuben felt that he'd come back later, get him out of the pit, so forth. Verse 23. And it came to pass, when Joseph was come unto his brethren, that they stripped Joseph out of his coat. They took his coat away from him. His coat of many colors that was on him. Verse 24. And they took him and cast him into a pit. They took the coat away from him, because they're going to use the coat in their little scheme. It's amazing how we work things out sometimes if we are given the privilege of using our own ingenuity. And we get it all worked out. We think, boy, this is going to work beautifully. And lo and behold, we run up against a brick wall. And we say, I didn't expect that. I didn't expect that to happen. So they take his coat away. They're going to throw him in one of the abandoned wells. And the pit was empty. There was no water in it, verse 24 says. So he's going to starve to death. He won't have any water. There isn't any food down there. And it's difficult to get out. Some of them were formed in such a fashion if you got in them, and some of them were deeper than others. Some were as much as 35, 40 feet deep. So if you got in one of those, you couldn't get out without a rope or something, no one to help you. Verse 25. And they sat down to eat bread. Isn't that rather strange? They take his coat away from him, threw him in the pit, no water down there, and then they sat down to have lunch. It sounds like a lunch break, doesn't it? And they sat down to eat bread, and they lifted up their eyes and looked, and behold, a company of Ishmaelites. came from Gilead with their camels bearing spicery and balm and myrrh, going to carry it down to Egypt. He went up to Dothan. The man says, your brothers are up at Dothan. Why did they go up to Dothan? Because that's the route of the camel train. The camel train that goes down to Egypt. That's how all of this trade and traffic was going on in those days. They didn't have the railroad or the aircraft or the mannerisms of transportation like we have today. They just had the simple old camel. They loaded them down, and they had a great number of camels that traveled in a company. And here comes this camel train coming up from Egypt. It's quite interesting. Verse 25, so they sat down to eat bread. They lifted up their eyes, and they looked, and behold, a company of Ishmaelites came from Gilead with their camels, bearing spicery and balm and myrrh, going to carry it down to Egypt. Now we got an idea. This is going to be interesting. Verse 26, and Judah said unto his brethren, what profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? What good will it do? How will we profit out of it? Say we slay him and we cover up his body, and nobody knows who killed him, and nobody knows where he's buried, and what good is that? That's what he's saying here in verse 26. Verse 27, come and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites. Aha! God's plan is gradually unfolding, you see. They thought it was their plan, but it's God's plan. God's plan was for young Joseph to get up to Dothan. The plan of the fellows was to throw him into the abandoned water well, kill him, but God's plan said, no, we're not going to kill him. I'm going to have you fellas sell him to these traders in this camel train that are going down to Egypt, because slaves brought a good price in those days. Male slaves, healthy young men brought a good price. So we're going to sell him. Okay, verse 27. Let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh. And his brethren were content. Now this is God's plan. And you see, when God's plan is functioning properly, then there's contentment, even with the ungodly. These brothers who are angry at their young brother, wanting to kill him, throw him in a pit, destroy him. One of them says, let's sell him as a slave. And the other brothers who were angry and full of envy, yeah, but that's a good idea. So they're at peace with the whole situation. Verse 28, then there passed by Midianites merchantmen. This camel train is coming by. There passed by the Midianites merchantmen, and they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the well. God isn't going to let him die. He isn't going to starve to death. He isn't going to dehydrate down there in the well where there isn't any water. They drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. Big transaction. And they brought Joseph into Egypt. Isn't that amazing how God works? Starts with a little old boy up in Canaan. Young lad in his teens. Not too well educated. He'd been sitting at the footstool of his father all of his life. And he was his father's pet. And he catered to his father. And his dad wanted a drink of water. The boy ran and got him a drink of water. If he wanted to lie down and someone to fan him so he wouldn't be hot in the heat of a July afternoon in the tent, the boy would fan him. And he looked after his father, and the father took an extra special liking to him. And he said, son, I love you. I love you. God gave you to me when I was an old man, and I'm going to do something special for you. I'm going to give you a special inheritance I'm going to give you this beautiful coat of many colors. I love you. You're going to be special to me all my life. But this is in God's plan. So the plot against Joseph was in verses 18 through 28. Now, Jacob, deceived by his sons in verses 29 through 36, which concludes our lesson, beginning in verse 29, and Reuben returned unto the pit. Reuben returned unto the pit. What for? And behold, Joseph was not in the pit. Reuben had suggested putting him in the pit, you know, because he was going to go back later and get him out of the pit. Now he sneaks back to the pit, back to the abandoned water well in verse 29, and he's not there. And he's perplexed. What happened to my brother? Where is he? And it says he rent his clothes. He was disturbed. He was perplexed. He didn't know which way to turn, as we say sometimes. Verse 30, and he returned unto his brethren and said, the child is not, the young boy is not in the pit. And I, whither shall I go? Where is he? Where shall I go to look for him? And they took Joseph's coat and killed a kid of the goats, a little baby goat. They killed a kid of the goats and dipped the coat in the blood. Now, you couldn't get away with that today because the chemist would analyze the blood and immediately the chemist would say, that's animal blood. This is not the blood of a man or a child or a young boy. Couldn't get away with it today, but in those days they didn't have that technology. They dipped his coat in blood, verse 32, and they sent the coat of many colors. Now, evidently, it appears that the coat was sent by servants to Jacob. They didn't take the coat. They sent the coat. They didn't have the nerve to go in with this coat with this blood dripping on it to their father. They had one of the servants, one of the hired men, one of the slaves take it to their father. They sent the coat, verse 32, of many colors, and they brought it to their father and said, this have we found. Dad, got sad news for you. It just shook us right down to the very tips of our toes. We haven't even hardly recovered from it yet ourselves. We just can't understand what's happened. We found this coat, and we know not now whether it be thy son's coat or no. We don't know whether it's our brother's coat or not. Here's this special coat. The old man knew all about the coat. So these boys are panhandling this off on the old fella as though they're innocent, you know. Isn't that the way when people are guilty? They kind of play up like they're innocent. They don't know anything about it. Just kind of happened up on it. Quite unusual. Notice what it says in verse 33. And he knew it. The old man knew the coat. Oh, yes. Jacob knew the coat immediately and said, it is my son's coat. He could identify it. An evil beast hath devoured him. Why? Well, the old man could not imagine the brothers slaying their own brother. He couldn't believe that. An evil beast hath devoured him. Joseph is without doubt rent in pieces. Oh, my precious little boy is torn to pieces. Some animal has chewed him up into little bits. Verse 34, and Jacob rent his clothes and put sackcloth upon his loins and mourned for his son many days. And all the time, the boy is on his way down to Egypt. Isn't that amazing? God protects under all circumstances. Verse 35, and all his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him. And in that house there was a big time of mourning, and everybody is sad, and they're trying to comfort dear Jacob the father, trying to say things that will please him. And this went on for days. But he refused to be comforted. And he said, for I will go down into the grave unto my son mourning. I'll die weeping over my boy. Thus his father wept for him. Last verse, verse 36. And the Midianites sold him into Egypt unto Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh's and captain of the guard. Exactly where God wanted him. God had it all planned. God said, I'm going to take this young lad Joseph, and I'm going to, through a series of process, I'm going to put him right down there in the palace of Pharaoh. Because the boy had already had the dreams. He'd already found out through dreams that God was going to bless. And God is going to bring this family down into Egypt. And they're going to come down with their empty corn sacks. And they're going to come down begging corn, coming begging to buy corn. From whom? Little Joseph. The one with the coat of many colors, the one that they threw in the abandoned water well. Isn't that beautiful? God is over and above every circumstance.
On the other side of the cassette, you will hear Dr. Estep bring another message in his Genesis study series.